Good morning, listeners. You are welcome to this week's Ag Report. I'm Jim Finn. My guests this morning are Aidan Brennan from the Irish Farmers Journal, Sadie O'Dwyer from the Holy Cross Ballycal Historical Society, and Pat O'Toole, the political editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. My first guest this morning, listeners, is Dara Kelly from Teagasc. Good morning, Dara, and thanks for joining us.
Hi Jim, how are you?
I'm
How's
good,
things?
Dara. I'm very good. Now, Dara, you want to, I suppose, talk a little bit about grass for the coming couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. We're into the peak season now with growth beginning to move on farms, and anyone driving around the roads would see that last week. There's a lot of silage being cut as well and beginning to go that way. So that's the time of year we're in, Jim. Um, so yeah, I suppose really the what we need to, I suppose, talk about a little bit is priorities and what we need to do in and make best use, I suppose, of the grass that's coming. We have, I suppose, priorities really are, they don't change from one year to the next, but I suppose it's just to reinforce it. Because, the year that's in it, things have changed now from last year. The milk price is not where we'd like it to be. There's guys I'm talking to at the moment and they're wondering what to do with the likes of reseeding, or do they make more silage or less silage? Those kinds of decisions are going on. So I suppose just to get the basics right, I suppose, Jim, really. So I suppose really like for May and June, first thing was first. I can make this very simple, Jim. It's three different parts. I suppose it's feeding the cow first. Excuse me, feeding the cow first of all, reseeding, and then making enough silage for the winter time. Okay.
Okay.
So I suppose if I look at it from an energy and protein point of view, feeding the cow comes in whatever liters she's doing. Like I just had a group there today, and we were looking at what the group average was
Yeah.
doing, and the average was roughly around the 26, 27 liters, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, that's roughly about 12, maybe a little bit more, 12 UFLs for the milk production part. And then I suppose if you have a cow, then somewhere around the somewhere between 550 and 600 kilos of live weight, that's another 6.5 or 7 UFLs for maintenance. And put it together, the cow needs 19, 20 UFLs in total. And depending on how much meal, like there today, the group was actually, feeding an average of 2 kilos of meal, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that works. What that translates back into is, they need 18 kilos of dry matter of grass to be put in front of them. And, you allow 18 kilos and the intake would somewhere, hopefully they take in 17 kilos of it. So you're allowing as much grass as you can. And, that's going to drive production. It's going to keep protein percent where it needs to be. Um, a lot of a lot of herds there at the moment are doing, well up on 2 kilos of milk solids a day, and it's to keep that going week after week as long as we can, into the back or the back end of the year. And I suppose that's, one way or the other, the cow has to be fed. But my point being
Mm-hmm.
that it's getting the grass into the diet, and the only way you can do that and keep uptakes or keep intakes up is to have your free grazings correct. So,
Mm-hmm.
13, 1400s is the name of the game now at the moment. How do you achieve that, Jim? You need to start walking the farm twice a week, to be very blunt about it. So, you know, we're probably, but the weather didn't go the way we wanted to go in the springtime. Lads are fed up. Now we're into the breeding season, the place and the silage going on as well. So places are busy. But getting the grass right is really going to pay dividends this year, because no matter what way you look at it, Jim, grass is cheaper, a lot cheaper than meal is. And if you can pull out that kilo or pull out that 2 kilos that you don't need to be feeding because you have the grass in front of you at the right pre-grazing yield, that's number one. Look, moving on, I suppose, reseeding wise, probably a little bit past it in terms of time of year now. If you wasn't getting reseeding done maybe in the last couple of weeks, or if you're getting a little bit in, I wouldn't discourage a farmer either to do it, or else you're looking at it doing at the back end of the year. So, like I was on a farm just, Jim, 2 weeks ago, and the question was how much reseeding had to done in the last 10 years. And because the milk price this year, you know, they were looking at it as an extra cost, and they weren't going to do it. And we were saying you need to get 10% done each year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go next year without doing any reseeding this year, you're going to do 20%. It's going to catch up on you. So, the target there really needs to be, you need to be pulling out where can you get reseeding done. It's probably gone a bit more expensive than it was last year as well. You're looking at somewhere 600 an acre, give or take. If you're doing it cheaper than that, fair play. But that's going to pay dividends to you. It comes back to to keeping control of the big cost, which is the meal, coming in and making best use of your fertilizer. So again, reseeded products, getting the fertilizer on, it's going to grow a lot more for you than a paddock that's not reseeded lately. Okay. How do you get there? How do you get out the 10%? You need to be looking at stocking rate then. So, like, if your milking platform stocking rate is above, we'll say 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, you're fairly well stocked. And because there might be silage or something out, short-term silage, and then we're asking lads to go reseeding on top of that. It's not really. It's a bit inachievable. Okay.
Yeah.
So really, you need to be looking at having a stocking rate around the 3.2, maybe 3.3 at the max. But to get that 10% every year comfortably in and be targeting it every April into May, you need to be looking at a stocking rate of about 3.2 and less than that, no more than 3.2, just to make it achievable in the first place. That's where we're finding lads are bit too high stocked on the platform, feeding the meal, can't get the reseeding done. A couple of years go by, less and less grass has been growing. You get the message. So that's a priority, getting the reseeding. And if it's not going to happen, hasn't happened last month or this month, it needs to happen in the back end. Third point, I suppose, Jim, is making the winter feed. Talking to the guys at the moment, there seems to be plenty of silage left over from last year, which is a great position to be in. And I suppose I was having a discussion with a guy today actually in the office, and he was adding on to the silage pit. He has a job done at the back, and that's a big it's a great investment to have. You have that extra capacity to put in more into the pit. I suppose the quality, this first cut's been cut at the moment. What I would suggest to guys is definitely do a fodder budget. And it sounds a bit out of sync this time of year, but you have an idea now what's after going into a pit and how many acres have been cut. For the first cut, there might be surplus paddocks in the next week or 2 or 3 weeks as the summer goes on, but you'd have a good idea what's after going into the yard, including what's been left over from last year. I suppose big one is to do a fodder budget, because most guys now at this stage will know fairly well what they're keeping for the year in terms of cow numbers or heifers or young stock. And if, like, even just for example, like a dry cow there for usually, for your 8 to 10 weeks of dry, needs about 1 bale of silage. And then you're looking at, that's for your dry cow feed. It doesn't need to be the high quality stuff, but then either side of that, you're buffer feeding the freshly calved cows or the cows that are going to be milked on. That's going to be, the other requirement then. So you need to sit down and work that out and have a fair idea where you are. Do you need to buy silage? If you do, start looking it up and start buying it. Or if you can get it in second cut, even better. And that's a priority. That needs to be done now, not in the back end when you realise you're short. So, look, that's my, I suppose, tips for the month anyways, Jim, really.
Well, very sensible takeaways for any farmer listening to us this morning, Dara, because, the decisions have to be made now. There's no point in trying to make them in the middle of August, because at that stage grass growth is going to be definitely
Mm.
well on the wane, as the fella said, you know.
Absolutely, and I hope we get a good back in as we can. And like, fertilizer prices are up.
Hmm.
Guys are talking to me and they're saying they're going to spread less fertilizer, and I'm blue in the face, nearly saying to them, if you spread less fertilizer, you're feeding more meal, so which is cheaper. So,
Yeah, and
and you need to look at it that way. The other tip, I suppose, I meant to mention there a
yeah,
minute ago, was the surplus paddocks. Anyone taking, they will be taking a few extra bales on the milking block. Um, you know, for every 4 bales an acre kind of thing, 4.5 maybe bales an acre that's taken off, that's 1,000 gallons of slurry that needs to be put back on. That's the offtake, and we find that the milking platforms are suffering after being cut. They're not coming back as quick. The P's and K's are beginning to drop, and the lime as well. So like, you think about it, every time you take 4 bales out of a field, it's 1,000 acres of or sorry, 1,000 gallons of slurry that needs to go back into the field, and even a bit of lime with it. So that's an important point as well this year. So people just tend to forget that part, but look, it needs to be said.
okay. Well, look, I want to thank you very much, because we're out of time, Dara, for joining us this morning. That listener was Dara Kelly, giving us some uh, important pointers for the next couple of weeks and maybe into the next couple of months. Listeners, my next guest is Aidan Brennan from the Irish Farmers Journal, no stranger to Ag Report on Tip FM. Good morning, Aidan, and thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning, Jim.
Aidan, you would like to bring us up to speed with where we are at with CAP at the moment.
Yeah, so I suppose the new Common Agricultural Policy is being negotiated at the moment in Brussels, and I suppose it's not good news from an Irish farmer point of view, because the debate at the moment is all around a reduced budget of a 20% or 22% cut in the overall budget available for CAP, which is supposed to kick in from 2028 onwards. But there is talk now, and we reported in the Farmers Journal about 2 weeks ago, that that's likely to be delayed, and there will be another carryover year in 2028 of the existing CAP. But that's yet to be decided, I suppose, in full. But either way, there's going to be a reduction in the money available to Irish farmers through the CAP whenever the new CAP does come in. And as you know, it's a huge impact on Irish farmers, because for the majority of beef and sheep farmers, the CAP payments, which come through the form of base or acres, or certain schemes such as SCEP, they make up nearly 100% of their income. So any direct cut to CAP is a direct cut to income for the majority of our livestock farmers. So that's problematic. But another row has started this week in Ireland between the ICMSA, the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, who generally represent larger beef farmers, I suppose, and primarily dairy farmers. They've suggested that in the new CAP, the minimum requirement to be considered an active farmer should increase tenfold, from 0.1 of a livestock unit per hectare to 1 livestock unit per hectare. So at the moment, all you need to do is keep 0.1 of a livestock unit per hectare to be considered an active farmer in the current CAP. So to put that in context, Jim, if you've 100 acres, you could keep 4 cows on that 100 acres and be considered an active farmer, whereas what the new proposal from ICMSA would suggest that should be 40 cows to be considered an active farmer, if that goes from 0.1 to 1. So that's a huge change. The INHFA, Irish Natura Hill Farmers Association, have come out against that, and they've said that this proposal would, if it was implemented, would adversely affect their members that tend to be more extensive farmers, I suppose, in upland areas, which there's plenty of them in Tipperary. More upland areas, I suppose, that farm more extensively would have a low stocking rate and wouldn't maybe qualify for that 0.4 livestock unit, or 1 livestock unit per hectare. So that's an issue. if that that row would if that happens, that would be an issue for those livestock producers in those extensive areas.
Will there be much pressure put on the European Commission during the Irish presidency of the EU, which will be kicking off in a month's time, a little over a month's time? This isn't the first time that we had a presidency just before a new CAP was announced.
It seems like it won't come down to the Irish presidency to decide the next CAP. It looks like it's going to be later presidencies where that's going to be decided. Obviously, Ireland will play a key part in the debate, and the debate around the next CAP will be certainly debated in Ireland during that time, but it won't be decided. The final say, I don't think, will happen in Ireland. If the CAP was to end, in the end of 2027, which was the initial proposal, then I think the Irish presidency would be far more influential on that. But I don't see that happening now. I don't think it'll be as influential as maybe it could have been. And I'd say, from a political point of view, I would imagine that the Irish government are probably happy enough with that scenario.
And of course, I know we're speaking in a vacuum in many ways, but can we expect that there will be more greening in the next CAP as well?
Hard to know where that's going to end up. By all accounts, so the current situation with our single farm payment, or the BIS, as it is known as now, there's different elements to that. There's the eco schemes, which would have been greening in the past. There's CRIS, which is a kind of an upfront payment for all farmers. But it's likely that some of the proposals, at least for the next CAP, will be that it'll be a flat rate area payment with no entitlements, is one proposal. But that remains to be seen. I'm not sure, is there going to be more greening in the next CAP? The emphasis in Europe and Brussels has been to move away slightly, or reduce the emphasis, not necessarily move away, reduce the emphasis on the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork proposals, which were very green, very environmental. So that emphasis has reduced. And when the last CAP was being negotiated, which is the CAP we have today, all the talk all around Europe and all around the Western world was on reducing carbon footprint, reducing the use of chemicals, reducing the use of fertilizer. Food security wasn't an issue. Whereas now food security is a big issue, because we're seeing all these wars take place around the world. Ukraine, Iran, Middle East, Israel and Gaza, all these conflicts are all feeding into the sense that food security is a key thing. But the main reason for the pressure on CAP, actually, and that CAP budget reduction, is due to the increased military spend that Europe has taken on. And CAP is getting squeezed as a result of that. So if there wasn't any wars going on, I think the CAP budget would be better. But it might still be greener, but it would be higher.
So that basically what we're looking at is that Europe is trying to balance food security versus possibility of war upsetting the whole balance in Europe. So they're spending the money on arms rather than spending the money on making certain sure that Europe can have the excellent food it has at the moment.
Absolutely, and you need to remember as well that Europe is very food secure. As a collective body, we have lots of food. We have surplus food, and we distribute that around the world. So Europe will always be food secure. The problem is we're going to produce less food, which makes other parts of the world less food secure. And you can go back to your history books. When food is scarce, we have problems in the world. So that causes more conflict and more turmoil. So it's an interesting policy by the European Union. Obviously, you'd like to see defence spending ramp up to protect ourselves, but we also need to see food security maintain its prominence, not necessarily just for Europe, but for the rest of the world. And I'm thinking here of Africa and Asia, food, parts of the world where food deficits take place.
Right. And of course, if everything that you have said so far turns out to be what the new CAP is going to be, we're now going to be looking at food here in Ireland, as dear and all as it is at the moment, will definitely get dearer if we're producing less.
Yeah, if we're producing less of it as a result of reductions to the cap, which makes it less profitable for farmers to produce food, they will produce less of it. And if it's replicated then across Europe, it's going to mean there's going to be reductions in food, and when supply goes down, demand goes up and prices rise.
And of course, farmers then, when they're not getting a good price for the food that they're producing, they will switch into some other enterprise, whether that is producing grass to go into bio refineries or whatever the case may be, again cutting down on the amount of food that's going to be produced.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've other demands on land as well, such as solar.
Yeah.
We're seeing that in Tipperary. Biomethane plants are going to take food. That might help our energy security, but it won't help our food security or the cost of food production.
Okay, so there's a lot of balls in the air to be ironed out. And if you are correct, and I'm sure you are, that this cap is going to be rolled over for a year, and there is precedence of that happening in the past, we'd want to be preparing for what's likely to happen now.
We would, and particularly if it's going to come into place at the end of 2028, that's not that far away, and these things come around quickly. So yeah, we would want to be preparing, and we also need more information on it, and that's only kind of coming in a drip feed scenario at the moment.
Okay, well, look at Aidan. Thanks very much for joining us this morning and filling us in on where we are with CAP at the moment. And it's a conversation I'm quite sure you and I are going to be having during the rest of this year and maybe an awful lot of 2027.
Thanks, Jim.
That, listeners, was Aidan Brennan from the Irish Farmers Journal. Listeners, my next guest this morning is Sadie O'Dwyer, or Sadie Flanagan. And Sadie is with me to talk about an event that's taking place in Holy Cross in the Abbey building on Saturday the 23rd of May. And I think it's something got to do with photography and filming and things like that. But look at Sadie is the person who is going to tell me all about it. Sadie, you're very welcome to
Thank you very much,
AgReport
Jim.
on Tip FM.
Thank you, Jim.
But more important, this is a very historical bit, I believe.
It is. We're showing a film in the hall in Holy Cross, and is a documentary that was made by RTE during the restoration of the Abbey Church during the years 1971 to 1975. Every important event that was happening during the restoration, RTE filmed it. And at the end of the restoration, Norris Davidson presented this beautiful documentary, and it went out on air the Monday and the Tuesday night after the official opening of the Abbey, which was on the 5th of October in 1975. So it went out in 2.5 hours, or just 25 minutes really, on the Monday and the Tuesday night. And it was just a beautiful presentation. He has a beautiful speaking voice, and it's just well worth seeing. And I think it's of more value now, the fact that he's 50 odd years on, and people of a certain age don't only know the Abbey as it is now, and they never knew what was like as a ruin. But in this film, you will be brought back and you will be shown the Abbey when there was just graves in it and headstones, and before all the excavations were done. And it shows the whole thing coming alive, because while we were fundraising for the Abbey back then, we used to say, help the Abbey come alive. And this film, in my opinion, we will see the Abbey coming alive.
Yeah, before we started, or rather before we went on air, you were saying to me that this is a story through the eyes of a young person in Holy Cross for the 4.5 years that the Abbey was being restored.
Correct,
And
Jim.
there's a little story behind that as well.
There is, Jim. It was a touch of genius on Norris Davidson's behalf. He got a little boy from the parish, a little 7-year-old boy, and he had him on his little bicycle looking through the gates of the ruined Abbey. And every time they came to film, they brought that little boy onto the Abbey, and we actually saw him growing as the Abbey was progressing. And the final thing was that he actually was an altar boy on the day of the official opening of the Abbey. And to add to that story, just at our big celebration last year, in which we celebrated the jubilee of the opening of the Abbey, this man rang the oldest bell in Ireland during the consecration of the Mass. And it was a lovely link to him. He actually was an altar boy at the original one, and now here he rang the bell. And that boy was Rory Dewan from Holy Cross. And we're hoping to have Rory and his wife Trina and some of his family as guests on the night with us.
Right, so, there's more than just a film. There's something to it.
There is.
Which is very important.
He shows the countryside around. He shows the weather. Back then, in my opinion, the weather was very hard. We had a lot of very cold winters, and we had frost, we had snow, and all of these things slow up work like restoration work. And it's just well worth seeing, really, Jim. It has to be seen to be believed, really.
So that's the highlight of the night, and I must say, it's in the Abbey itself, in the upstairs.
No, we're actually having it in the hall, Jim.
Oh, are you?
We're having it in the hall,
right.
because we're expecting a good attendance at it, and we're not taking bookings or anything in advance. You just turn up on the night, and we have music at the very beginning, and it's from an artist from Cashel called Billy O'Dwyer Bob. And by coincidence, there's a milk wheel in Holy Cross, and during the restoration of the Abbey, his dad, Martin O'Dwyer, worked on that with Ned Marshall, and they worked there for a couple of years on the restoration of that. And he in turn then went on and he opened the Folk Museum in Cashel. And this is his son, Billy O'Dwyer Bob, and he's an award-winning singer and musician, and Billy is going to entertain us with a few songs at the start to get us into the mood for the film.
Right, and then when the film is all over, I believe Billy is going to do another bit.
Well,
but you have Tom Gallagher.
What happens then? Billy is going to start us off with a few songs. We're going to see part one of the film. We're going to take a break then for about 15 to 20 minutes, and we're going to have a cuppa and something to eat for people, and then we're going to have part two. And then at the very end, we have a lovely presentation from Tom Gallagher. It's a PowerPoint presentation of the highlights of the Abbey, and we have photographs of so many beautiful features from the Abbey, and that includes our east window and our sedilia and our mason's marks and all. And Tom has a lovely presentation which will run for about 5 to 7 minutes or thereabouts.
Right, so all in all, you're saying roughly a 2-hour event.
Lovely. We're planning around the 2 hours, and that's including the little tea break. And of course, we will have a little raffle as well. And we have some nice prizes sponsored for that. And we'll sell those during the interval.
Okay, that's that. Of course, a lot of people don't know the part that you played in the restoration of the Abbey. So if I bring it back to 1971, you were in a wooden cabin just inside the arch going into the cloister.
That's right.
Right. What was it like in
Oh my
1971?
God, it was hectic really, because I was just after finishing school, after doing a commercial course, and Father Lynch was the parish priest, and he asked me would I be interested in a secretarial job, and of course I thought it was great because I never had any desire to go away from home, and started up there. They got this Barna hut, and that's where everything really went on. It was the hub of everything that happened. It was kind of a parish office, and it was the secretarial place. It was the fundraising office. Mario Martinez, we had a professional fundraiser from America, and he operated out of that office. And in turn, then Eamon de Stafford suggested that we should run a tourist office there. So the tourist office was running as well, and then our guides operated out there, and we always had about 10 guides, and we had an awful lot of visitors coming throughout the time of the restoration. But we were always able to show people around, avoiding wherever it was dangerous to go, so it was very good.
And you would have met a lot of famous people, politicians and presidents of Ireland at the time.
I would. Any of them that came, I met them, because everything, as I say, happened there, and it was a great time, really. It was a very, very busy time, and it was all trying to get as much publicity as we could, because it led to the fundraising. It was such a big project to undertake, and luckily enough, a lot of money did come in, and probably it did cost a lot more maybe than what we had planned it to cost, but it in turn was paid off, and luckily it was all paid for,
Right, and let me bring you back to the film then. Of course, there will people come to the showing of this film on this night week, and they will see, some of them will see themselves in it, but more of them will remember the people that were in it, because an awful lot of people worked on that abbey over the 4.5 years.
They did. During that period of restoration, at peak time, we probably had over 50 people working there. These were wonderfully wonderful craftsmen. We had all the carpenters and the stone masons and even the scaffolders, and the general workers had so much work to do. And this film, in my opinion, is a tribute to those great men. Mm-hmm. Without them, and the people who initiated it, the people who thought about restoring it, the likes of Archbishop Dr. Tom Morris and Willie Hayes, and the people of the parish who agreed to have it done and got ahead with helping with fundraising and everything else. And I think it's a tribute to all those great people, and especially the craftsmen. You will see the craft, the work those men had to do. And even though it's only 50 odd years ago, it was quite primitive. The work was very basic, and you will see the tools that they used. And as an extra little sideline on the night, Paddy Slattery from Cormackstown Heritage Centre has very kindly offered to bring over some of the old tools that would have been used right through the 800 years of the history of the Abbey. And I think they'll be of great interest. People will love to see them.
And of course, and Paddy is a great person to have.
Absolutely.
In the locality.
Oh, yeah. He's
not alone does
terrific.
he give you a thing, but he also gives out his lovely historical tools or dressers or whatever
everything.
It is to
He's so
local
good.
drama
yes,
groups
he
when
does.
they're
He
doing
does.
things.
Yes.
Anyway, we're running out of time. So give the details again. It's in Holy Cross.
In Holy Cross, in the hall. It starts at 8 p.m. and it's the admission is €10, and you'll have a cup of tea as well at the interval. So it should be a very enjoyable night, and it's run by a new group of people who have just got together here in Holy Cross, called the Holy Cross Ballycal Historical Society. So it's a kind of our maiden voyage for us, and we're starting out to try and do things of interest for people to come and see.
Sadie, look, thanks very much for joining me this morning and sharing all that wonderful information. And dear listeners, if you have a free moment this night week, why not drop down to Holy Cross? You will surely be entertained.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
Listeners, my final guest this morning is Pat O'Toole, the political correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. And as I said, political is the operative word, because a bit of news broke from Brussels this week that will be very significant for events here in Ireland and across the whole of Europe, and that's with regard to Brazilian beef. I let Pat tell you the story. Good morning, Pat, and thanks for joining us.
Morning, Jim. I suppose this is a long-running saga in relation to Brazilian beef, standards, Mercosur. We seem to have been talking about it for decades. As we all know, the Mercosur trade deal, including significant tonnage of beef coming in at low tariff, was agreed earlier this year, despite Ireland's opposition and virulent opposition from Irish agriculture to that element of the deal. And it passed, and it seemed like that was that. Despite, a lot of evidence around the fact that the kind of standards that are expected and demanded, indeed, of farmers and the entire food chain around beef in Europe doesn't seem to be pertaining in Brazil in the same way. And you saw Adam Woods, our editor now, then our beef editor, our livestock editor, had to turn in last year, along with Tomas Burka and our photographer Philip Doyle, went to Brazil and uncovered the ease with which antibiotics could be gained for animals, something that can't be done here, and the concerns around that. But now, in a plot twist, the European Commission has signalled that all Brazilian meat products, including beef, could be banned from entering EU markets from September, because they're saying, Brussels is now saying that Brazil is not abiding by antibiotic rules. So no one really expected this to happen. It's going to mean that Brazil is going to have to scramble to prove its credentials, and is going to have to do some verification. Irish farming has been saying for many years that Brazil had huge amount of catching up to do to meet our standards, and that fair trade must be about equivalence of standards. Otherwise, it's an unfair trade, because there's a cost associated with the standards for producers, and you're tying one hand behind the back of European producers if you ask them to reach standards, and you allow in imports to compete against them that have different standards. So, it is a fundamental issue. So what's happened is that last Tuesday, member states got an updated list of third countries who are eligible to export meat and animal products to the European Union, and Brazil was not on this list. The Commission welcomed the vote in favour of the list of countries that are approved, saying the countries who appear on the list have proven their compliance with the EU restrictions on antimicrobial use in food-producing animals. They also said that under EU rules, the use of antimicrobials in livestock for growth or yield purposes is not allowed, nor can animals be treated with antimicrobials reserved for human infections. So they describe antimicrobial resistance as one of the biggest public health threats of our time. And ensuring the prudent use of them in animals is ensuring that and safeguarding the health of European citizens. So is this linked to the Irish Farmers Journal investigation? I'm not certain that that's the case, although it certainly did repeat the concerns that have been stated by farmers all over Europe for decades. But what certainly would have had an impact was the tainted beef notification at the back end of last year. We know that 128 kilos of tainted beef entered the food chain in Ireland, and the likelihood is that the beef had been consumed by the time that the authorities were notified around this hormone beef getting into the European Union late last year. So I think the Commission were taken aback by that. It did undermine them. Ironically, maybe these things just move slowly, but it didn't seem to have any impact on the debate in the turn of the year around the ratification of Mercosur. And we saw that passed by a majority of countries. Of course, Mercosur is about more than Brazil. The Mercosur countries, there's 7 of the 12 countries in South America directly linked to Mercosur. You have, another very big beef producing country in Argentina.
Yeah.
You also have Chile, which produces a lot of meat, particularly lamb. So you have, it's not just about Brazil. It's also not just about meat, of course. It's about an awful lot of goods and services being, pardon me, it's about an awful lot of goods and services being traded between South America and Europe. And farmers were never saying that there shouldn't be trade deals. What they're saying is there shouldn't be trade deals that allow meat produced to different standards into the European Union. And now here we are some months later, and it seems like the European Union is going to back the calls by Irish farming and others to ensure that either Brazil steps up and complies with European standards, or its meat can't be consumed in Europe.
Pat, am I right in saying that when all the debate was going on about Mercosur, that we got assurances that the beef that would be coming into Europe from Brazil would come from a number of specially designated farms?
Well, certainly that was the case when we were seeing much smaller volumes coming in. But again, the question is, who is controlling, who's ratifying where the beef is coming from? Like, we've seen a lot of movement, and the Farmers Journal investigation back in 2007, when Justin McCarthy and the Farmers Journal IFA investigation, says Justin McCarthy, Kevin Kinsella, and John Bryan uncovered, significant movement of animals, retagging of animals, movement between foot and mouth affected regions and regions that were foot and mouth free, and there were huge concerns raised at the time. And eventually, under significant pressure, the FVO, the Veterinary Service of Europe, which is ironically based in Ireland, moved. And I don't know exactly how much things have improved. Things have improved since then, but have they improved to the point where we can say that you can verify Brazilian beef the way we can verify Irish beef? I don't think so.
I spoke to Adam, the aforementioned Adam, when he came home from Brazil. It was of his opinion that Brazil would never be able to have a proper traceability service in their country because the country is too big and it would be virtually impossible to police it and to make certain sure that it was implemented properly.
Yeah, well, I mean, the country is massive. Europe is pretty big, and we have that verification all over Europe, and we can stand over it. It's about having systems and standards that are robust and having verification and having enforcement, and we have that in Europe. We have to demand it of countries who import in the interest of fairness and fair trade, and also for the public health and public confidence in our food, which is, I suppose, one of the reasons that the EEC became so involved in food production and the regulation of food production, and why the CAP was put in place 65 years ago. So it's fundamental to the European project that the citizens are given a guaranteed supply of high quality food at an affordable price. And that all breaks down if we allow importation of food that doesn't meet the standards expected by European consumers and delivered by European farmers.
Okay, look at Pat. I know you're on the road and you're trying to get home. I just want to thank you ever so much for stopping on the journey and having a chat. That, listeners, was Pat O'Toole, who is the political correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. That, listeners, is Ag Report for this week. I hope you enjoyed the show and that you'll join me at the same time next week. Coming up next is the news at 10 o'clock, and after that, Eamon Dwyer presents Down Your Way.